Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. Happy you could show up on this wonderful day. It's a nice, Saturday, the 25th of May. It's around 3:39 in the afternoon. I'll set the timer for 3:36 so I don't run over an hour. And let's go. So I will do. This is a broadcast dedicated to Vedic astrology, how it affects the world, or how it reflects the world, and how it affects your individual signs. And let's see now. And I just want to put the closed captioning on. And let me see. What's going on. All right, and I was just trying to make some adjustments on my computer. I apologize. That's very rude of me. But I wanted to look at the chart for the coming week. We do have actually two very significant changes coming up rather shortly. We'll have, and I'll explain them to you in a couple of minutes. But in case you would like to contact me for a reading or for astrology lessons, please contact me at 508-525-0001. My schedule has been rather hectic lately. I've been doing a lot of side projects, and also a lot of appointments outside of astrology. So it's sort of, I'm going to need probably a little bit of a break so I can focus on writing and things like that after a few months. But I just wanted to share with you today what's going on today, what's going on in the greater world. And we are going to be having some long promised interviews coming up, and also some long promised reviews of books coming up, new books, and also there's a Gurukulam, Saptarishi Gurukulam presentation on in the month of July. Anybody interested in presenting at that, please contact me. And you can contact me at 508-525-0001. I do have an interview with, and also you can contact me at GaryGomesG@gmail.com. All right, so it's Gary Gomes G, GaryGomes, the letter G at gmail.com. All right, so let's look at the astrology and look at what's happening as we speak. And I'm going to share a chart with you so you can look at it. All right, so we have, just get this. It's not quite screen sharing. Screen sharing, yeah, sorry about that. All right, So let's see if the screen share is working now, and we'll do it one more time for good luck. So that's the rule of three. Okay, so, or it's an adaptation of the rule of three. So right now we have, as we're speaking, we have K2 in the first house. So as we know, the world is a little bit messed up right now. We had the loss of the Iranian president last week. Not necessarily a good guy, although I don't like to see anybody die, to be honest. And we have Mars in the seventh house. So we can probably expect for another week and a half some more violent or unexpected accidents, because Mars K2 aspects do tend to make it easier to make mistakes, to engage in misunderstandings. Saturn also aspects Mercury, the planet of communication in this chart. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of in the political and military venues, and even in some business venues, there's a lot of concern about the future. Rahu Mars tends to cause panics. It causes people to feel isolated or overreact. And we're seeing this basically happening in the presidential elections and in elections around the world. So this is not surprising, given the way that COVID really did disrupt a lot of structures of countries around the world. There have also been a series of armed conflicts or armed interventions which have caused large immigrations. There have also been what I would call deliberate immigrations. And by that I mean that it's not that people coming from these other countries are evilly plotting to take over the United States. That's not the idea. It's that they're coming for economic or political opportunities that they couldn't have in their home country, which is understandable. But coming on the on top of a pandemic, coming on top of enormous levels of military spending, tax cuts, vast levels of domestic spending, there is a lot of pressure on the financial system right now. Now, I do tend to be one of those people who believes that government debt affects inflation only indirectly. It affects economics only indirectly. If you go back to John Maynard Keynes, government spending was only one component of economic recovery or economic expansion. Okay, so economic expansion usually means inflation because you have too much money chasing after too few goods. But I think one of the things, and again, a lot of people don't like Keynesian economics, not because I mean, every economic theory works to a certain extent. Okay, so let's be clear about that. Monetarism works to a certain extent. Every economic theory works to a certain extent. But I think one of the things that struck me when I was studying economics way back many years ago is that there is only so much money you can pump into a system before prices start to inflate. So you had a large, so just to bring it back to the 1960s, late 1960s, you had a lot of domestic spending and a lot of military spending. So we were supporting expanded domestic policy in the United States. Many countries around the world were, and also supporting a war effort in Vietnam. The problem with these things is that you have if you add an oil shock to that, as happened in 1972 and happened for a brief while in 1969, in 1972, then in 73, 74, and then again in 1979, that essentially, even if you put a lot of money out there, it's going to raise the base prices of things. And so essentially, if you have a system that's raising the base prices and you're also pumping money out into the system, and you're also trying to accommodate large masses of people who are in desperate need of help, then a lot of economic systems tend to bend under that kind of pressure. It also becomes difficult if you have not a low taxation policy, but a minimal taxation policy, which seems to target the middle class very strongly. And that's what happens. That's what's happened mainly in Europe and the United States. Certain other countries. So this is the backdrop. This is why we're having all these problems right now. So we had a massive economic closure in 2021, not just in the United States, but around the world. And that caused a scarcity of goods. Then you have oil pressure. Then you have immigrants who are leaving their countries for reasons. I won't get into whether or not they're valid. Some are valid, some are not so valid. And I think you have, so this is so like an economic pressure cooker. And I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Real estate will continue to go up because there's a housing shortage, but that also creates inflation. And so ultimately, that Saturn, that Mars Rahu combination can cause some panic connected with that. Now, I'm not saying we're on the precipice of economic collapse. That's not what I'm saying. But we are pretty much on the precipice of what I would call a stock market panic. And one of the things that's going to cause that, at least from what I can see in June, or maybe a little bit earlier, is Mercury moving into Taurus. So when you have a pile of planets in one sign, you have a lot of planets in one sign, you're going to see a lot of activity. The other thing that's going to happen within about roughly a week and a half is Mars is going to enter Aries. So Saturn will be aspecting Mars. It'll put a lot of pressure on fuel supplies, also real estate. And so that will, so right now, President Biden is trying to release oil reserves, and again, bluntly, because it's an election year, so he can keep the costs down and thereby keep inflation down. But other pressures will come to bear on oil and natural resources because of the Saturn-Mars aspect. So I'm thinking it may work short term. I don't think it'll work long term. And so I'm not really seeing an end out of this cycle really until maybe around October. And also you'll have a lot of planets in this sign. You'll also have an eclipse in October. That'll be kind of significant. But these two small planetary, so the eclipse will come in the sign of Pisces and Virgo, which are important signs indicating change or disruption. So when Pisces, Virgo is a very orderly sign. It's a very resource-driven sign. Pisces is a sign connected with all possibilities. So there'll be this demand for expansion or reform, and also some scarcity when the eclipse hits around October 2nd. Not to worry, I don't think it'll be a bad thing. And again, one of the things to keep in mind is you have Mercury entering Taurus. It's actually a good time for longer term investments. It's also a good time for investing in land, gold, what I would call fixed assets, and security assets. And Saturn's going to stay in Aquarius. So we're going to see a lot of financial innovation and a lot of product innovation over the next couple of years. So this is not necessarily a bad thing. And towards 2025 to 2028, roughly, I think you'll see a lot of expansion like we saw at the end of 1998 to 2000, just because of Saturn's position, and that'll continue really until around 2010. So at least from the chart, though, I'm not really a big fan of when planets cluster in fixed signs, because that essentially tends to make people more dogmatic, more rigid, more stiff, less willing to take chances, less willing to experiment. And for me, that's not a good look for anybody, for any country. The one positive thing about this conjunction is that a lot of things that have been covered up or hidden for a long time will be exposed. And what I mean by that is things connected with trade, with finances, with politics, especially domestic politics. And it'll essentially cause some major shakeups in authority. Now, this is only really going to be a prominent feature until around June 15th. And I think one of the things you're seeing already is because you're seeing increasing conservatism, you're seeing some layoffs in what I would call entertainment or technology. So those are the branches that are being hit, academics as well. And you will see more of a return to a traditional structure academically, especially because, just by coincidence, the ninth house is the dominant house in this chart, and that has to do with higher education. It's also one of the charts connected with leadership and philosophy, and you'll see an increasingly conservative tilt, not only in the United States, but around the world. That doesn't necessarily mean that people will be thrown into jail if they're not conservative. It doesn't mean that people will be put in POW camps or concentration camps. The ones that are doing that already, countries like China will continue to do that. But I think, but this conservatism is not a kind of a jailing conservatism, despite what people are having you believe. It's more of what I would call a repositioning, because we've had a lot of emphasis on change over the past, 3 years, and it'll continue really into the end of 2024. But after that, you'll see more focus on business, more focus on trying to rebuild economies, assess natural resources, and those types of events. The Mars K2 combination is, again, not good for things like water, tragedies and disruptions and accidents. I think one of the things that I noticed was whenever Saturn goes over Aquarius, especially over a lunar mansion, over certain lunar mansions, we have an increase in air traffic accidents. So if somebody's taking a shortcut or somebody makes a mistake. Saturn's aspect of Mercury right now, there's a lot of what I would call stupid or ignorant reporting going on right now. Like I said, this is from both sides of the aisle. This isn't just from one side of the aisle. And so there's this like conscious, not really effort to hide, but effort to confuse or to be pessimistic about the future with that Saturn-Mercury combination. So this isn't necessarily the end of it. Again, like I said, this is a temporary situation. So for 2 months, actually for about 3 months, we had media just getting really apoplectic about the world situation and wondering what's wrong with the people. And there's nothing inherently wrong with the people. It's just the media has been used to minimal pushback from the population. They've been used to, and academics as well, have been used to minimal pushback from the population. That's going to stop. This is very similar to late 60s United States, and even to a certain extent, late 90s United States, when there had been an increasing liberalization of academic institutions and governmental institutions, and then all of a sudden everything kind of froze in place. And keep in mind, this doesn't stay consistent. So in the 60s, you had the Carter administration, which was actually what I would call a moderate administration, but it was replaced by a very conservative administration. And I think that basically we'll see a relatively similar pattern coming up roughly between 2024 and 2030. Okay. So is war a possibility? Yeah, it's always a possibility, but I'm thinking more so that we have more panic or more fear of war, more agitation, more propaganda connected with war right now because of the Mars-Rahu conjunction. The Saturn-Mars aspect will encourage people to get more involved in warlike activities, but I'm not really worried about explosive events until October. The other thing is, excuse me, we have the moon is in the fourth house, so there's a lot of focus on public image, especially in politics. It's an election year in the United States. They're going to be holding elections in England very soon, and a lot of this is focused around political rivalries. So the next couple of years, prepare for a lot of changes in government. That's just sort of like in the stars. So let's move on to the individual astrological signs, because I don't want to go too far off the cliff in this stuff. But basically, kind of a disruptive time. Mercury moving into, if there are any economic birds that are coming home to roost, you'll start to see the start of that in June. But I'm not so sure. All right, so we're back. All right, so I'm not sure it's going to be such a massive issue. To be truthful, the Trump trial meets again on in June. It'll be interesting to see, even if he loses, he wins in this. And it's mainly because all these planets were clustering over his sun sign. Okay, so don't get upset about him. They're clustering around Joe Biden's 7th house of open enemies. So that's a little bit difficult for President Biden. I'm going to stop the share and start up again. But there will be a shift, probably in a couple of months, where Biden will get a bit of a pickup. I still think the way the chart of the country goes and the way the individual charts go, it still favors Trump. But again, this is one of those things which is really, it's a very tight election. It's still a very tight election. But increasingly, there'll be more and more scandals exposed from these two candidates. So just prepare yourself for that. As a matter of fact, in virtually every contest around the world, you're going to see massive scandals, just because of Rahu in Pisces. Okay. All right, so let's go on to your individual charts. So Aries has Mercury in the first house, quick thinking, quick moving, quick acting. Good for money for Aries this month. Good combination, Lord of the 5th, 3rd, and 9th houses in the 2nd house. Good for financial growth. A lot of expenditures again show up for this sign. That's par for the course until Mars changes signs within about 2 weeks, and a little bit of obsessive spending too, to be honest. For Taurus, career life will be good for this sign, by the way, this month. For Taurus is May 15th through June 15th. Sun, Venus, Jupiter are in the 2nd house. It'll give good financial gains because the 11th Lord is in the 1st house. That has to do with finances. 8th house Lord is in the 1st house. It has to do with research and investigation. Lord of the 2nd house of finances is in the 12th, but it'll move to the 1st by the end of the month, by May 31st. So actually, that will be good for financial growth for Taurus. For K2 in the 5th, children will be difficult. We've already said this. Moon is in the 8th house. That'll be good for research and unexpected gains from allies. And Saturn aspects Mercury. So there will be spending on So again, don't trust friends. Friends will tell you what you want to hear, but they'll also be sneaky behind your back. And the other thing is, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the relationship life in this chart. So that's something to keep in mind. Career-wise, it looks positive, but not a lot of financial gain really until May 31st. For Gemini, Gemini has Mercury in the 11th house, so that's good for financial gains, but there is a heavy expenditure pattern or a lot of time spent dealing with convalescing or with staying behind the scenes. Emotionally, the sign's a little bit depressed right now. Moon is in the 7th house, so there's a change in relationship partners or attitudes about relationships. Jupiter is in the 12th house. It could signal the end of a relationship or the reconsideration of a relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean an end. Saturn is in the 9th house. This is a good placement for financial growth, but again, it's slow and steady, not very dominant. Mars is in the 10th house. This is a good placement for career recognition or fame, and also some possibly a part-time income coming into the sign. So a lot of part-time job opportunities coming in. But again, heavy expenditures, convalescence is indicated. For Cancer, Cancer has Moon in the 6th house, so there can be some danger of health issues for the sign this month or this week. K2's in the 3rd, gives the sign a great deal of courage, a great deal of stamina, but you do have to watch out for your health and also for enemies. And 7th house Lord is in the 8th, so again, that can mean abandonment or absence of a relationship partner. Mars is in the 9th house, along with Rahu. That's a Raj Yoga for this particular rising sign. That's actually good. That's a good combination. It gives fame, recognition, status, and teaching opportunities. Mercury's in the 10th house, good for career. Jupiter, Sun, Venus, Sun. This is one of the few signs that's going to do really well this month, or this week, excuse me, because you'll have a cluster of planets in the 11th house of gains. For a Leo, Leo has Sun in the 10th house. Venus and Jupiter are in that particular sign right now. That gives, and Mercury will be in it by the end of the week, so that gives good financial outcomes for this sign. Good luck in court dealings or in political matters, and also in work life. So this is a good, although it's albeit a temporary measure for career success. For this chart, Saturn is in the 7th house, so it can give some difficulty with relationship partners, and it can also give some problems with opponents. So opponents will be unwilling to give an edge. Saturn aspects Mercury in this chart, but it also does give a certain amount of stubbornness to the sign. Saturn aspects Mercury, so misunderstood communications are common for this sign during this month. Within about a week, that will pass. And Mars and Rahu are in the 8th house. So again, more problems, more legal, Mars and Saturn are in the 8th house, that's right. So more legal problems for down the road and more concerns about health and vitality. So every time this sign seems to take a step forward, it'll take a step backwards as well, but it'll succeed overall. For Virgo, K2's in the 1st house. This isn't a bad placement. It makes the sign very intuitive, but it can cause some sudden disruptions in life. Venus is in the 9th house. That's actually good for teaching opportunities and for gains of, um, and for losing one thing and getting another. Third house Lord is Mars. Lord of the third house, which is the house of desires, is in the seventh house. So this longing for affinity or relationship with people, but it seems like relationship partners are always ready to fight. I'll be happy to see that go. And Moon is in the fourth house. So this gives a change in direction in terms of home life. Saturn's in the sixth. So there's a lot of determination, a lot of blockages, but a lot of determination. A lot of interest in spiritual knowledge for the sign this month, and a lot of learning this month for this particular sign. So this is sun, moon, or rising sign in this particular, in Virgo. For Libra, Libra has Mercury in the seventh house, so it will attract a lot of younger people. It will attract a lot of new friends, and also it will be overall a more cordial position for this sign. We have Moon in the third house, so there's a desire to change careers or take control of career. Saturn is in the fifth house, and Saturn in the fifth, good luck is indicated if you just stick with your commitments and keep your head down and do your work. Mars is in the sixth house. That's not a bad placement at all. It gives the ability to overcome enemies and to give a good accounting of yourself in battles or fights. You have a lot of planets in the eighth house. This can give unexpected gains, unexpected or unanticipated gains, but they're uneven or sporadic. So that'll be the situation really over at least the next month, and more than likely over the next year. Okay, so more consistent income after Venus goes into Gemini in about a month or so, but I think Mercury in the eighth house will give the opportunity for windfalls or financial growth. Career-wise, not a bad week for this sign. And luck-wise, not a bad week for this sign either. For Scorpio, Scorpio has Jupiter and Venus and Sun and soon Mercury in the seventh house. So this will give a lot of relationship opportunities, a lot of business partnership opportunities. So the seventh house is not only for wife or husband, it's also for business partners. So that's actually positive. But it can also give more open enemies, if I'm quite honest. This sign has some trouble with jealousy connected with finances, some financial. So be careful how showing your integrity, Scorpio, because you will be scrutinized very heavily. Saturn will be very unforgiving on this sign, so be careful about financial gains. Be extremely ethical. Moon is in the second house. That's not indicating that Scorpio isn't an ethical sign. It's just the Mars Rahu makes it sort of a controversy magnet lately. So that's been difficult for Scorpio risings, at least in general. For some, it's produced great opportunities, but for others, it has produced some scandal, some problems. And for Saturn in the fourth house, some difficulties with home life, although this can give an increase in status as well. K2 in the 11th house. Again, don't trust your friends. It's not really. I'm not really expecting this sign to be paranoid, but just be careful. Sagittarius has moon in the first house. It's in Mula Nakshatra, which is a very difficult nakshatra. So it indicates change, but change with some work. Saturn is in the third house, aspecting Mercury. And so that'll give some potential for career success. Mars is in the fourth house, some arguments or at home. Jupiter, Venus, Sun are in the sixth house. This sign will be very hardworking this week and through mid-June. For Capricorn, Saturn is in the second house. It gives this sign good potential for gains, but with a lot of hard work. Mars and Rahu are in the third house, gives this sign a lot of courage. Mercury's in the fourth house. Communications are stifled for this sign. Jupiter, Venus, Sun are in the fifth house. That's actually a good placement, especially good for investments. But this sign is naturally cautious anyway. Ketu's in the eighth house. In the ninth house, can give unexpected gains. Moon is in the 12th house. Be careful about losses, especially because of relationship partners and business partners. For Aquarius, Saturn's in the first house, gives the sign a lot of authority, but also a lot of pressure. And again, to be honest with you, it experiences a lot of jealousy during this transit. So a lot of people are looking to knock this particular moon, sun, or rising sign down. Mars and Rahu are in the second house to give some panic or some concern over finances. That'll pass within a couple of weeks. Also over property, Mercury is in the third house. There's a lot of communication going on with this sign, but it's kind of depressed. Jupiter, Sun, and Venus are in the fourth house, so there's a lot of focus on property this week. It'll last until through mid-June, but it'll resolve happily. Ketu's in the eighth house. That gives a strong interest in fulfilling desires, but your desires seem not to be addressed that well. Moon is in the 11th house, will give good financial gain for this sign. Finally, Pisces, Mars and Rahu are in the first house, can make this sign rather argument prone. As a matter of fact, Aquarius, Virgo, Leo, Sagittarius are all rather argument prone this month. Aries too are all rather argument prone this month. But basically, it's very strong with Pisces, and Mercury as the second lord. As the seventh lord in the second house will give temperamental wives or difficult partnerships. Jupiter, Venus, Sun in the third house actually gives the sign a good deal of optimism. Moon is in the 10th house, strong desire for career and heavy expenditure pattern for the sign, unfortunately. So let's go on to the map, because I don't think we have much time. And let's see now. All right, so let's see if I can get this down a little bit and open it up. Again, astro mapping. All right, so this is a good map. It's a fairly large map. So in Hawaii, still some scandal connected with land, actually in the Aleutian Islands and in Alaska as well. Mercury is hitting the west coast of Canada, but it's really not interacting with anything except for governmental units over here, and Venus, Jupiter, Sun. This gives, I would tend to say, overreach in governmental matters in these states. So Washington, Oregon, Nevada, California, and even into Colorado. It looks like, I would say, Colorado, and even into Arizona. So I think we're seeing, and with Saturn encompassing that, this part of the country looks pretty closed down politically. Mexico itself looks pretty closed down politically. Now this is really not that close to the population centers of Mexico, which is, well, actually it is. I apologize, it is. But this could indicate some economic trouble for Mexico. There's a moon line running through Michigan all the way down through Nicaragua, down or close to Nicaragua, and so this can give changes in government, essentially down through Mississippi, Georgia, and there's a Rahu line going right through Massachusetts, really close to where I live. So this can give some governmental scandals or some governmental disruption in the East Coast, especially around this part of the country. Actually, it'll affect the entire East Coast. Definitely affect, some potential for violence as well, especially in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and maybe even in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is going through elections right now as well. So I think you'll definitely see a change of administration down there. And Venezuela and all the way down through Ecuador and Peru. Looks like some potential for violence. For violence and for change of governance in those countries. There's a Mercury line running up through Argentina, so a lot of the information, Argentina and Uruguay, also up through Brazil. So we're getting bad communications out of Brazil, Iceland, and also again some government oppression indicated close to the edge of Brazil. Also, this is also affecting the UK, Spain, France, Norway, Sweden, Finland. This is kind of a disappointing map because it looks like there's going to be a lot of what I would call government suppression, especially of information in these areas. And it's mainly because, and there's a Saturn line, so this could give bad economic news to this part of the world, all the way down through Morocco, down to the Ivory Coast, and also this part of the world will be lit up, especially the French area of Africa, or the former French colonial area of Africa. And also Italy will have some scandals erupting in its government. Italy, Sicily, Libya, down through, down really through Zimbabwe, and even into South Africa. We can expect some violence in these countries. Sudan in particular is in the middle of a civil war, which again is not really broadcast that much because it doesn't impact on US politics all that much as far as we see it. The other thing is we have a moon line running through Greece and Eastern Europe, so we should see some flooding or events connected with flooding in that part of the world. And there's a Mercury line running through Western Turkey and Syria and down into Saudi Arabia. So we can expect some weather damage and also some media suppression in those parts of the world. We have the Sun, Venus, Jupiter line is passing over Moscow, or close to Moscow, and is passing over Iran. As we know, that there has been a change of administration, or there's been the death of a president in Iran. And I think one of the things we'll see is this will shake up. It won't really reconstruct this part of the world, but it'll be tough on the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait. The other part of the world I want to focus on is there's a Saturn line running through India. Pakistan and Afghanistan are sandwiched between the sun and Saturn. So is India. This tends to mean there have been some worries that India is going to get more militaristic. And there's a Saturn line running up through Ladakh in Bangladesh. And there's a lunar line running through close to those countries. So there'll be a spotlight on this. So India may actually get more aggressive within a few months, if not immediately. There's a Rahu Mars line, so we can expect some fighting or some arguments in the Philippines, in Indonesia, not in the Philippines, excuse me, in Indonesia and Vietnam and Thailand and Cambodia and Myanmar and parts of China, the regions of Manchuria. The other part we look at is we have Mercury running through Australia. So again, that's more suppression of information, more need for censorship. My apologies. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit. And finally, oh, for God's sake. And finally, we go over to New Zealand, and it looks like there'll be more government restrictions in New Zealand. New Zealand, for some odd reason, will come into the news next week. I'm not sure why. Maybe because of disruption of the government. But I think that's about it for this week. For those of you who haven't yet, please subscribe, like, and share. I appreciate it. Give me some suggestions. If you want to contact me again, 508-525-0001. As always, my thanks for watching this long-winded exposition. And I love you all. Thank you very much for all your support. And take care of yourselves. Things are starting to get subtly better, okay? It's really not, we're not quite under the, out of the woods yet, but Rahu is getting less dominant, Saturn is getting less dominant, for at least for a little while. So that's good news. Okay. God bless you all. Be careful, especially traveling on this weekend. And again, I love you. I support. I really, really think you can do wonderful things with your lives. Just plan and be yourself. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Okay. Thanks a lot, folks. Bye-bye.